So Tia, gut reaction to what you just saw.
Well, I think my gut reaction is honestly, I don't think it's going to have much of a change. If you were already inclined to support J.D. Vance, I think you're happy with how he did. If you already were inclined to support Governor Walz, I think you're happy with what he did. I think everyone can probably agree that on style, J.D. Vance was stronger, particularly at the beginning. I think everyone can probably agree that by the end of a nearly 2-hour debate, a lot of people probably had checked out. I think people can also agree that Walz had a lot of substance that, if people were paying attention, was pretty strong. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it won't change much.
All righty. So Chris, as we talk about tone, and it is interesting, right, that for the Democrats, they will be saying, but Walz was great at the end. Was anybody still watching? I mean, we've heard it said that Donald Trump was posting about Pete Rose midway through the debate. He might not even have been watching it completely. Where, Chris, were these men strongest? Where were they weakest?
Yeah, I mean, I think that J.D. Vance was quite good. I mean, I think it's important to remember that these presidential and vice presidential debates are performances at some level. You know, these are not dry presentations of policy positions. These are sort of how can you best answer the questions? How can you talk more about what you want to talk about, less about what you don't want to talk about? Can you have a moment? And I thought J.D. Vance was very skillful, very able, looked confident. He looked comfortable. T is right. Walz got better as it went along. He started off, I can only imagine Democrats are having flashbacks to the June 27th Joe Biden performance in that debate. He started off rough, but he did get better. Look, you'd always rather to have your best moments in the beginning, 9 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern time when the audience is the largest. I will say, though, that the way that social media now works and the way that late night shows work and all that sort of thing, YouTube, TikTok, I think that the Walz moment where he confronts J.D. Vance about did Trump lose the election and J.D. Vance refuses to answer, which came very late in the debate, I think plenty of people are going to see that. I'm not sure it's an issue that persuades people who have not made their mind up yet, but I don't think it'll be an issue of whether people actually know what happened.
You talked about moments. Katie, I know you're at a watch party. It's a Democratic watch party. Was there a moment there?
The biggest standout moment, Adrienne, was that January 6th moment. As soon as that topic came up, this crowd became very animated, yelling at the screen. And when Tim Walz sort of nailed J.D. Vance down and asking him that direct question, did Donald Trump lose the election? And he couldn't answer it. This crowd had a very strong reaction. This is a Democratic crowd, of course, and so that is something that unites this crowd. They're concerned about what happened around January 6th. Other things that people in this crowd told me about, they appreciated the tone. They thought it was less combative. They appreciated that there weren't the personal insults that some had seen in previous debates like this. And they also had a little bit of nervous energy around Tim Walz. There was concern right out the gate, but people I spoke with said they were willing to give him a little bit of leeway there because they see his authenticity as that everyman kind of politician as something that's endearing. But again, this is a room where everyone's mind is made up.
Yeah, one commentator referred to it as a nice fest. That January 6th conversation that Katie mentioned and Chris, you were just talking about, just to go back to you, Chris, on that for a moment. Mm-hmm. Is that going to go anywhere past this night? I mean, it's been a huge conversation for a long time in the United States. Does it land on the ballot?
So, politically speaking, I think the answer to that is no. I think if the 2020 Donald Trump's false claims that the 2020 election were stolen and January 6th are a critical issue to you, you're already voting for Kamala Harris, and you were long before tonight's debate. I think if you're an undecided voter, a swing voter, an independent voter, I'm less certain that conversation or the broader conversation about January 6th and democracy moves you. Remember that Joe Biden centered his entire campaign, his entire 2024 campaign, around this idea that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, citing the 2020 election and January 6th as the main reasons. I think that is a very legitimate and compelling argument. But you know who didn't? Swing and persuadable voters. It just didn't move them. And so I don't think a conversation on the later end of a vice presidential debate will change that dynamic much.
Well, we've been talking about moments. I'd like to play you one that's been talked about a lot. Immediately after J.D. Vance was talking about people in Springfield, Ohio, having lives destroyed by, quote, Kamala Harris's open border. Here's what happened in the course of that conversation. Have a listen.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Hey, Tia, what did that moment say to you?
Well, that moment said to me that J.D. Vance seemed a little bit sensitive about that topic, and sensitive particularly about being fact-checked on the Haitian migrants in his state. Because that wasn't the first time they kind of closed a segment by having a clarifying kind of statement. I think it kind of showed him trying to assert himself over the moderators. I don't know who won because there was kind of that back and forth. Maybe the folks in charge of muting the mics won ultimately. I think it is, another one of those moments that might be passed around in videos and on TikTok. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to reinforce for Republicans, for Vance supporters, that they feel like the media was, the moderators were already stacked against them. Whereas, again, if you weren't already inclined to support J.D. Vance, it's just going to be reinforcing the fact that he continues to spread lies and misinformation about Haitian migrants.
One of the patterns that emerged tonight was how J.D. Vance would consistently use the Biden-Harris record in his attacks. Why don't we listen to one of those?
If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago.
Chris, he's got a point. They are the incumbents. How do you think that attack will land, especially in an election where the cost of living is such a priority for voters?
Yeah, Donald Trump would do well to watch J.D. Vance's debate performance and then copy a lot of the rhetoric. Whether that's on abortion, whether that's on immigration, whether that's on Kamala Harris and what she's done as vice president. That's the message I think that probably can win Donald Trump the election, which is you say you're going to do all these things if you're elected president. Well, you've been vice president for 4 years and you haven't done them. Why not? I think that's a pretty compelling message, especially when you remember that Joe Biden, 38, 39, 40% of people approve of the job he's doing. This is not a popular administration. Kamala Harris doesn't want to be tied to it. I thought Vance did a really nice job with that.
Mm-hmm. Katie, you're in Miami. Obviously, this is not talking about a border state, but immigration is a top issue for voters countrywide, even there. Why don't we listen to this from Governor Walz on that?
Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime.
Okay, that attack against the Trump-Vance ticket. Any sense from the room where you are now whether people there thought that was effective, giving, that how many voters are looking at specific proposals from the Harris-Walz camp?
Immigration was the second issue that sort of got the most attention in this room, and there is a lot of concern about the rhetoric that has come from J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, particularly for the Haitian community. At this watch party, the Democratic Haitian Caucus members were here. They expressed a lot of frustration and anger about some of those comments, particularly related to whether it's plans to do mass deportation, with J.D. Vance filling in a little bit of what that might look like under a Donald Trump administration, as well as incendiary division divisive comments about what's happening in Springfield, Ohio, or what's not happening in Springfield, Ohio, and the consequences of those words. People told me they are angry, they are frustrated, but they're also saying we have to put the emotion aside and use it to be motivating, to bring it to political action, to motivate the hundreds of thousands of members of the Haitian community, particularly in the state of Florida, as well as other parts of the United States, that you need to move it into political action and bring allies into the movement to stand up when people say things like that. So that really was how things resonated in this room. There was a lot of concern about what Republicans could do should Donald Trump return to the White House and implement some of the policies that he is promising to do.
Okay, Katie, we have about a minute and a half left, so I'm going to start with you, Katie, and then go to Chris and then Tia. For last thoughts about what to look for next and your feeling walking away from this experience tonight. Katie?
J.D. Vance came off as the more disciplined version of Donald Trump, the version that Donald Trump's advisors had hoped he could do. They will try to spin that into a win, whereas we'll expect the Harris campaign to move forward, saying that Tim Walz got in that final punch and that he landed that blow about January 6th. They'll go back to their camps, each declare victory, and push ahead to the final sprint to the end.
Okay. Chris, do you think that there's something, if this is the last debate, what's the next thing you're looking for? And please don't say Election Day.
Look, I always think with Donald Trump, he's utterly changeable and transactional. So, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of another debate. I will say, I think he will not do another debate to clean up a mess that J.D. Vance created, however, which is what some Democrats were saying might happen. J.D. Vance was very good tonight. He's a better spokesperson for Trumpism than Donald Trump.
And Tia Mitchell, last thought to you.
Yeah, I wonder if J.D. Vance doing relatively well and some of the recent chatter about 60 Minutes and other opportunities that Trump may say yes to something. But I think, honestly, there's so much on the plate of not just the candidates, but the Biden-Harris administration. So they're going to have to focus on, the substance of what's on their plate in the coming days.
All right, Tia Mitchell, Katie Simpson, Chris Cillizza, thank you all.